This is the Civilization Battle Royale X, Season 5, Episode 18, Gunpowder Empires. Hi everybody, my name is Quantum Botany, 3-time narrator and a follower of CBR since the Mark II reboot. I apologize in advance for the narration being a little short and sweet at times. I have been attempting to move to a new city this past week, and it has not gone nearly as smoothly as I hoped. After a lot of road bumps and frustration with apartment leasing offices, I managed to get everything sorted out and can bring to you Episode 18 of the Civilization Battle Royale X Season 5, Gunpowder Empires. Without further ado, let's get to the original content. Here we have Orange Chrissy / Anarkitty's comic about certain interlopers in the Circassian Scythian War. I personally really like the unit icon of the biremes, so I hope they keep showing up in random silly places throughout the game. Here is a chart by Aladar, or You Lama Caledarian Lord AMA, visualizing the top 5 activity scores by episode. New South Wales leads the pack, but episode 17 Tang is pretty impressive still. Thank you to all the generous supporters who patronize the CBR. You are making the dream happen. This week's PR slide is the Seychelles. Why? Because the PRs aren't out yet, and they are my favorite civ. I imagine they stayed just about where they are in the rankings, perhaps with a bump for the massive power spike that comes with taking half of Maine cities. Go Seychelles! You are my strongest tax haven! Okay, let's get to the episode. The action! The Anishinaabe forces secure Kariu, pushing the depleted Pomo army back to Makamo. A succession of foreign invasions has weakened the Pomo state to the point of collapse. The complete loss of the Northeast Territories would represent an irreversible contraction in Pomo power in the North American balance of power. The Zaragoan Navy punches through the Yanomami line and brings Nani Mapuateri down to the yellow. The Portuguese fleet of their unique naus can be seen arriving from across the Atlantic. The invasion of the Zaragoan Islands was conceived by Yanomami leadership as an easy win. They are, after all, a quarter of the size. The potency of Zaragoa's cutting-edge navy, made up from fast-swimming frigates with cannon much more powerful than those of the standard galleass, and sitting high above the water with the shooting and sighting angles, was severely underestimated. Wallachian units, including the Lefegi, their UU, which has plus 20% defense against ranged attacks and heals when ending turn on pillaged farms, are cut down in Hanseatic territory by more technologically advanced counterparts. It would be expected that Wallachia would be a formidable foe given their tendency to spend 80% of their GDP on the military, but in this new era of the CBR, the tech gap increasingly discriminates losers from winners. Tech doesn't win wars by itself, however. Last episode we saw Chono and Zavante declare war on Caral. Here we see a Zavante army of dubious modernity bear down on their former city of Wedeze. The surrender of Wedeze represented a humiliation to the royal family of Zavante. Recent decades in the royal court of Apoena have been dominated by a sense that the Zavante state is on the verge of dismemberment and erasure by its neighbors. Internally, Apoena himself has on more than one occasion had to intervene against regional nobility suspected of cutting secret deals with neighboring powers. To restore confidence in the power of the state to protect its constituents, Apoena decided that Wedeze should be reclaimed. Ternate makes peace with Caral, surrendering control of the Marianas city of Sampalu. Japan is still at war with Ternate, but it appears as though the war has petered out. Ternate's constantly embattled frontiers recede. A fleet of Zazao triremes batter the walls of Kerouane. In normal circumstances, this would be irrelevant this late into the game, but Wasolo is so enfeebled by its constant struggle with the Ores and Portugal that this could potentially go somewhere. Morpeth and Mudgee, the newest additions to the burgeoning New South Wales territory. Miserable places, Morpeth and Mudgee were founded as fishing, whaling, and crabbing outposts, where the business attracted migrants and families from the mainland to work the colony's kitchens, packeries, and hospitality industries. Despite the harsh conditions, many people have thus far found happiness in their new remote home, far from the troubles of the metropole. The Chono army and navy, long inactive, crushed down on the unprepared city of Upaka. Capac did not expect such a sudden reversal in Chono relations, but from an outsider's perspective, it can be better understood. The scramble for the Pacific has led to a rivalry between the two South American participants, but it was until now understood that regardless of which island was claimed by whom, and which set of privateers raided which settlement, that relations on the mainland would be largely unaffected. But as the economic and strategic importance of Pacific holdings eclipsed their more reputational beginnings, radical ideas began to circulate among the Chono elite. Why do they allow Corral to bully them in the Pacific when they, the Chono, are preponderant on the continent? So, without Capac's knowledge nor understanding, Corral's colonial class somnambulated into a catastrophic provocation, and a war against a Chono-Zavante axis for which they are entirely unprepared. Kadiu is re-entered by a reduced contingent of primitive cavalry. Trotting through the barren, smoking outskirts of the settlement, each individual somberly ponders a number of questions, pinning their thoughts like a paperweight. Is this time different? Can we hold the frontier? Are we going to lose everything? Why are we losing? The words remain unspoken. The front between Potiguara and Guaycuru sees relevant progress for Potiguara. South America finds itself in a general war for what seems to be the millionth time. Is this time different? Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the ruler of what would be a powerful empire if it existed anywhere else. Surrounded by behemoths, peers, and green Ukraine, Hideyoshi dreams of better days when they had a soft target to their south, Ryukyu. He purposefully does not dream of when they nearly burned his city down. French units failed to make progress in taking the city of Inverness, despite having many geographical advantages. Hanseatic forces pressed down on their lines to the south. Despite having a large army, France is behind in technology and will likely fail to press forward. The Portuguese navy steals Nani Mapuateri from right under Zaragoza's nose. While it's doubtful that they'll hold it, Nani Mapuateri, you should be sorry, was a 30-population city, and its reduction will be a statistically significant loss to the Yanomami. Here we see the beautiful landscape of the Tarim Basin and Tibet, or we would be able to see it if not for the carpet of Orda horsemen, Karakita's unique unit. Its abilities have been explained in PRs and episodes before, I believe, so check the stat sheet basic info tab if you're curious. QK here has declared on Mysore, going for another grab at Karwar. Will their powerful uniques finally bring the city under their control? Probably not. The Uel Longa Fada is a faster and weaker galleon that steals XP and gold from its victims. Here we see two of them with their big, beautiful models floating by Potiguara. The Bay of Bengal looks nice when it's not full of half-health galleasses and galleons. While the recent war between Bangladesh, Mysore, and Lanfang had few results, the borders look a lot nicer and more rational. Portugal looks a lot better since their catastrophic war with France. Don't quote me here, but maybe they could come out on top if they attacked France now. Upaka predictably falls to the Chono onslaught, and their navy has moved on to Cabayete, which has begun taking damage. Corral has begun to mobilize a response, but fighting on two fronts is difficult, and the attackers still hold a large advantage. This war is also being fought in the Pacific, but Corral being forced to move units to the mainland has stymied their response. Chono captures the old Banuba city of Dangu, situated on one of the largest islands in the region. Herero, despite appearing large on a map, is very sparsely populated. Only one city, Okahanja, is of a significant size. Otherwise, the Kalahari Basin is dotted by a constellation of small to medium-sized settlements. Perhaps if Herero improved its tech count, it could break out of its geographical prison? The Kipchaks. Nice carpet, crap stats, probably could beat Bactria, or even Scythia if they were quick with it. Nanimapua Teri is retaken by the Yanomami, with its population being reduced to a measly 12. The technologically advanced Zaraguan navy has scattered, but the damage has been done. Yanomami is a large and powerful civ. This incident is nothing but a humiliation. Wallachia is so gross looking. Turnu has been citadeled from both sides, leaving a one-tile salient through which units can move in and out. Wallachia's expedition into Hanseatic lands has failed to even scratch the walls of Bremen. It seems unlikely, however, that Hansa can muster enough forces for a counteroffensive in the immediate term. Regarding the long term, if Wallachia wants to keep Turnu, they need to get out of this war and, just keep sitting on their ass broke as hell. It's mostly worked so far. Escalating border provocations once again boil over, and Australia erupts once again into familiar open war. New South Wales government mobilizes outback militias and constructs new siege engines, ready to march on Darlingunaya. Their way of war involves leveraging their large, dispersed population to establish local levies and quickly mobilize large forces. Banuba, unlike their land-advantaged enemy, maintains a professional standing army, one of the few civs on the cylinder to do so at this point in history. The force is defensively oriented and experienced in manning the Great Wall around which defense of the large frontier is organized. What initially seems an irrelevant declaration of war against Mysore is in fact not. The city of Dharwad, located on what I believe to be Christmas Island, is not far from the New South Wales island city of Ross. Personally, I think it just happened because Mysore and Banuba have very similar colors. The Azores are claimed by Yanomami. Since they are still at war with Portugal, I doubt that they will remain under Yanomami control, given the whipping their navy has received from Zaragua and Portugal. The conquest of the most populated portions of the Viatkan realm happened quickly. In a pair of overwhelmingly short conflicts, Scythian horsemen rode down and surrounded the unprepared Viatkan military and extracted the submission of its fortified cities through sieges. In the eyes of the great Scythian clans in Gelonus, this was to be the end of Viatkan resistance. Instead, the occupation of Viatka proved to be difficult, unpopular with the clans, and very, very, very expensive. Scythian hosts are forced to spend immense energy and resources just to quell constant rebellions, both in the conquered territories and in the overtaxed and overburdened core cities. Another French mass assault sloughs off a fortified Inverness. Robespierre orders the constitution of another assault force, but this is met with skepticism by his generals, who are beginning to recommend a shift in strategy towards defense, given the lack of successes both against Hansa and Inverness. Copano, an ancient settlement on the Yucatan Peninsula, is not, as is commonly believed, an integrated part of the Teotihuacan Empire, but rather a tributary city-state, whose inhabitants are in fact more linguistically related to the Karankawa of the north coast of the Gulf. Its tributary status has been relatively stable, but recently, Spear Thrower Owl announced the confiscation of countryside territory traditionally held by Copano. This, of course, was met with outrage by the Copano elite, but there exist scant ways for them to resist the annexation. Now, Copano's territory is fully confined to its city walls, making it entirely dependent on food exports from Teotihuacan, further enfeebling the city-state. heavily armored Anishinaabe dragoons crash into the city of Katuli, melting the column of defenders in its path like warm butter. Meanwhile, contingents of crossbowmen shred the manpower of Pomo infantry outside the city, forcing retreat. Pomo's defense of the northeast, outgunned and outnumbered, is beginning to lose morale. The Chono Navy pounds the shores of Kabayete, bringing it down to half health. Meanwhile, Apoena's forces close in on Wadeze. Corral has organized a response in the form of knights and bowmen, but this force arrives too late. They are already enveloped by the massive Zavante force. The northern border between the Anishinaabe realm and that of the Tlingit is quiet. The Tlingit state has a complicated relationship with Anishinaabe. On the one hand, Anishinaabe's position in the middle of the continent allows it to facilitate trade with the rest of the continent and beyond. In this way, Tlingit is dependent on Anishinaabe for access to products from the Western Hemisphere. On the other hand, Tlingit sees the Anishinaabe, rightfully, as a challenge to their power. Anishinaabe's rise has been meteoric in the previous few decades, with leaps and bounds in population growth, infrastructure, and technology, and most recently the conquest of Nanza, the former capital of Ponca. Their army is by far the largest and most successful in the region, save perhaps for the Tlingit themselves. Sheikh's attitude towards the Anishinaabe thus oscillates between a Thucydidean enmity towards the rising power and a prosperous partnership. Indeed, the Tlingit have a close eye on the Anishinaabe. Here can be seen the Za, Tlingit's unique musketman. Whenever the Za defeats an enemy, it provides culture towards border expansion in the nearest coastal city. When ending its turn on a coastal tile, there is a 33% chance it will gain an extra movement point. Based on the musket squares pioneered by the Anishinaabe, the use of which has enabled great military successes, the Za represents Tlingit's first gunpowder-based military unit. Given the lack of progress on the Hanseatic front, France signs an armistice with them, instead focusing on cracking the nut that is Inverness. France's military reputation is on the line. Zavante's forces continue to surround Wadeze, but have yet to strike, instead choosing to wear down the defensive units surrounding the city. Meanwhile, Potewara struggles to fend off Guaycuran units and citadels deep into their territory. Here we see the Atlantic Northeast, featuring Susquehannock, Newfoundland. Relations between the two eastern North American powers are apparently chummy, given that they have an open borders agreement. Bum Onondaga still rocking triremes on turn 242. The beleaguered Pomo forces retake Katuli, but a much larger Anishinaabe force is on its way. Pomo is holding on, but it seems like only a matter of time before their defense collapses. To the north looms the long shadow of Tlingit. Long the boogeyman of Pomo foreign policy anxieties, the Tlingit Empire has long been reluctant to completely eliminate Pomo as a state for fear of strengthening Teotihuacan, Anishinaabe, or some other upstart West American civ. This conceptualization of Pomo as a buffer state, however, stands at odds with the territorial ambitions of the increasingly powerful Saganag Church, who have spearheaded efforts to annex more and more Pomo territory, including a recent treaty zone on the California coast, in which Tlingit merchants, diplomats, and missionaries hold extraterritorial rights. Faced with the imminent collapse of the Pomo military to an insurgent Anishinaabe, the strategic value of Pomo as a buffer state is diminishing. I don't know what to put here, so let's look at the Lanfang great artist Hiranand. Hiranand was a prominent master court painter in Mughal India, active during the late 16th and early 17th centuries. His career spanned the critical transitional artistic periods between the reigns of the Emperor Akbar and his successor, Emperor Jahangir. Hiranand was highly regarded for his contributions to major imperial manuscripts that documented the history and lineage of the Mughal Empire, such as the second major illustrated copy of the Akbarnama. Portuguese conquistadors claimed the island of St. Helena, christening the settlement there as Viseu. Portugal, facing invasion anxieties, agricultural crisis, and urban overcrowding, has seen an exodus of the population to the sea, with diaspora participating in such historic events as the capture of Nani Mapua Teri and settling remote islands. Zazao, now armed with advanced carracks and their unique Yan Lefida, brings Kerouane down to half health. The city will likely flip, but it's unclear whether Zazao can hold on to it after that. Thoroughly blocked by Corral's capture of Sampalul, Japan makes peace with Ternate, who escapes the coalition mostly unscathed. Or so we thought. Humabon, king of the Cebu stratocracy, sees the weakness of Ternate and attacks. While evenly matched in sea power, Cebu has a great land unit advantage with their trebuchets and unique amphibious pikemen, the Timawa. Cebu is so cool. I hope they win. The Seychelles, a militaristic, hierarchical society coming out of a long period of isolationism, has ceased its invasion of Maine, for the same reason everyone else does. Carnawu is simply too well fortified. Inaba is no small prize, however. With more land on the Arabian Peninsula, they can cram in more units and cities. With the war over, they now begin focusing on honing their battle tactics after centuries of disuse, learning important military lessons and gearing up for their next invasion. Their massive and advanced armies may yet sweep across an unprepared Africa and Arabia. Maine might have only been an appetizer. Not only is Scythia dealing with internal unrest and an economic slump, but the Circassian invasion, initially conceived as an easy way to placate warlike internal factions, is going badly. Initial thrusts on Tuapse and Baigar Kal were easily repelled, and now Dimkovo, in the occupied territories, is contested. The internal situation in Scythia continues to deteriorate. Kabayete falls to Chono, but it looks likely to flip back at least once more. Zavante forces camped outside of Wadeze continue to wait. Continuing the bizarre war between Wasulu and Zazao, Kerouane is brought down to half health. Despite the ongoing attack, the majority of Wasulu forces are stationed to the north, likely to defend against a possible Portuguese or Ores attack. The Susquehannock Corps. It looks significantly more developed than many episodes ago, and cityless dead zones are being infilled. Hooray! Whale, facing similar migratory pressure as Portugal, as space is at a premium, settle Bermuda. Biarmia faces unrest by virtue of assumedly low happiness. If I lived on the Kola Peninsula with medieval technology, I would be unhappy too. Jailolo flips to Cebu immediately. What a potent showing from Cebu. It's 11:30 p.m. and I'm dead tired from negotiating with this rental company to sign a lease to move into an apartment, and they made me pay $30 to take a picture of my cat to verify its identity. I'm not happy. After sufficiently pressuring Dimkovo, Circassia secures a white peace with Scythia. This will only serve to further aggravate discontented factions in Scythia. Despite the size of the conquered cities, Scythia has yet to annex any of them. Embarrassing. The Guaycuru-Potewara War continues inconclusively. There is bigger news on the far left of the shot, however, as Zavante has begun to damage Wadeze. If they are able to take it and hold on to it, it would be a major upset. Mysorean fishers and crabbers have settled scant bits of livable land on the cylinder's bottom edge. While a lucrative business, they live in constant anxiety of discovery by New South Wales, with whom Mysore is at war. As of now, either New South Wales hasn't noticed them, or is ambivalent to their activities, preferring to dedicate resources to more important theaters of the war. Wadeze falls down to half health as Apoena's mass-mobilized force crushes down on the city, vastly outnumbering Corral's technologically superior force. The Great Tang, with all their regional preponderance, still makes designs to cripple its many neighbors to assure they remain subordinate. After a failure to destroy Cebu power in the South and East China Seas, Tang strategists have waited for an opportunity to strike when Humabon is weak. Perhaps this time has arrived, as Cebu is embroiled in a fierce and attritional war with Ternate. Orda cavalry pour through the mountain pass, aiming to capture high ground positions around Karwar. One by one, they are destroyed by entrenched artillery set up on vantages over the pass. Despite their force's 20-to-1 superiority over the defender, geography favors the defenders. It is unlikely the city will fall. The morning atmosphere in Minghuang is loud and oppressive. The sound of jungle birds and monkeys, mining equipment, and the typical hustle and bustle of a large city permeates the still hot air. Now looming over the city skyline is Luo Fangbo's newest palace, so imposing over the surrounding buildings and so well guarded that it is dubbed the Forbidden Palace. 2 of 10 usefulness and a Battle Royale score on the stat sheet. +1 culture, +2 delegates in the World Congress, -10 unhappiness from population in non-occupied cities. The remaining independent Ponca polities quietly go about their day the way they always have. Wainzude and Hubdon are entirely cut off from one another by the Rocky Mountains, making them all but tributaries and vassals of the Anishinaabe. The historical capital of Nanza and the wartime capital turned refugee camp of Zadade now make up the Governorate of Poncan territories and are slowly being integrated into the fabric of the Anishinaabe tax and tribute system. Wadeze is now held only by a straggling group of defenders who, if given the opportunity to evacuate and retreat, probably would. Since the city is all but surrounded by the bloodthirsty armies of Apoena, however, this isn't an option. The only choice is to go down fighting. Portuguese pioneers reach the South Sandwich Islands and begin to set up camp. Further south, an unlikely group has set up a fishing and whaling station in the Antarctic, Zaragua. If only Zaragua had put this kind of settling energy into the early game. The Australian War continues as a flotilla of New South Wales ships surround Ewa, managing to nick its defenses. To the north, a Banuban relief force musters, preparing to challenge the blockade. Near Darlinguanaya, the New South Welsh force has not managed to seriously damage the city, and judging by the raised tiles on their side of the border, Banuba has snuck in some counterattacks. Fresh off their victory against Ma'in, the Seychellois pivot to their next target in their invasion of Arabia, Sumer. While their forces are indeed larger and more advanced, Seychelles' main productive centers are far away from the front, while Sumer has a home field advantage. This war may stall initially for the Seychelles, but as the war goes on, the production and tech gap will begin to show. Jailolo, so fun to say, falls back to Ternate, but it is apparent that Ternate is running out of steam. Cebu continues to prosecute its offensive, taking strategic positions on Sulawesi and Mindanao. The Banuban generals in charge of the Pacific Islands decide that while Chono is on the back foot in the Pacific, they should attempt to expand their insular holdings. This may not be a very good decision. Chono's garrisons on the islands sport frigates, while Banuba's military presence here is small at best. Wadeze falls to Zavante, whose units immediately split between consolidating their position there and launching a new attack on Huaricanga, one of Corral's largest cities. While chances that Zavante could hold on to Huaricanga are slim, the threat of a flip could be enough to convince Corral to accept the loss of Wadeze. Caruane falls. It will probably flip back, but the flipping will significantly weaken Wasolo's already minuscule productive capacity. Facing similar problems as Karakitai, Pakistan's armies continue to file in through a one-tile pass to assault Sarepta. Sarepta is very difficult to take from this direction, so it may remain Phoenician until either Circassia attacks them again, or the advent of indirect fire. After the umpteenth failed attack on Inverness, Robespierre throws in the towel. Having made peace with both of his rivals, it seems unlikely, barring a coalition, that France will break out of its squeeze box, especially since Scotland's science is so much higher. France's chances are slipping away by the day. Nani Mapuateri has been reduced to 5 population from its previous 30. While a few Zaragoan frigates still remain around the island, the worst of the assault appears to be over. The wars between Estonia and Biarmia are so asinine. They both suck complete ass, and are in a classic crab bucket situation, where they are both stuck in the bucket, but keep pulling each other down, making it so that their bucket-bound status self-perpetuates. Estonia has crap production. Biarmia has crap science. If one ate the other, they would be, by all metrics, in a great spot. Too bad that they can't stop pulling each other down. Caruane flips again, as Zazao units pile into Wasolo territory through the Ores. If this war goes on long enough, could Wasolo be eliminated? If so, Zazao would attain some very ugly borders. Beautiful Bangladesh. Aretas III, in real life the king of the Nabateans and the friend of the Greeks, spawned as a great merchant. Bangladesh also settled Faridpur near Dhaka. Teotihuacan, smelling blood in the water, declared war on Pomo. Their targets are Elem and Tatem. The terrain is very difficult, but this might be made easier by another event notification. The Tlingit have decided that the era of Pomo's usefulness as a buffer is over, and have so lost confidence in Pomo's ability to defend itself that a wholesale partition of the civilization between the 3 North American players is now on the table. Get your popcorn. Dihya plots her next conquest, this time aiming east toward the Hyksos. The Ores military is not well concentrated in this direction, and while frigates are a big advantage over galleasses, numbers matter, and the Ores don't have them right now. Katuli is secured by the Anishinaabe, and the assault on Makamo begins. To the southeast, the city of White Earth is founded, further pushing Anishinaabe's frontier west. In the Pacific Northwest, skirmishes are already beginning between Tlingit Zaz and Pomo longswordsmen. Pomo's core seems hollowed out, and further losses seem likely. A view of Ethiopia's core, much more built up than previously, though still sparse in terms of cities. Despite their war with Zazao being something of a Pyrrhic victory, Zazao's citadels have encroached on their former city of Fatika. Ethiopia could probably make gains in any direction save for the Seychelles, but any 2 fronts would put the Civ in grave danger. Ethiopia must play the next few episodes well if they want to crawl back into relevance. More Bjarm slop. Gee, I wonder if anything will happen in this war. Venus Koger has taken damage, but the limited approaches to the city will make a capture difficult. After all, it's Estonia we're talking about. Even if they take the city, they'll just give it back at the end of the war. Karal retakes Dangu, much to the chagrin of Banuba, who probably want the city back. Karal has a meaningfully strong fleet here, and it's possible they could sweep through Chono Polynesia. Though this area is so fluid, it's difficult to ever know what's going on. Low-level conflict continues on the 2-tile border between Ponca and Susquehannock, but it's largely irrelevant. Also visible in this slide is what I believe to be our first glimpse of the Susquehannock unique musketman, the E18, which has one more movement than a regular musketman and can pillage tiles for no movement cost. Accused of collaborating and enabling the Chono invasion, as Corral regains its footing in the war, it issues a, as of now, symbolic declaration of war on Rapa Nui. The island, ever reclusive, did not, in fact, participate in the naval campaign against Corral, given their express lack of a navy. But if Chono pieces out, it could be lights out for the most impotent and glue-eating civilization in CBRX-5. Here we see the line that is Luba, stretching from the Gulf of Guinea to Zanzibar. Their army is big and scary looking, and could in fact deal some serious damage to their neighbors if they decided to. The invasion of Sumer begins, and the Seychelles unveils a weapon not yet seen on the cylinder, the cannon. Raining projectiles at a distance and fire rate greater than any trebuchet, the cannon shreds through the composite bows and pikemen of the Sumerians. In the age of gunpowder, the world belongs to those who can keep up with military technology. The Tlingit declaration of war against Pomo was perceived as a betrayal of the terms of the previous peace treaty, and Pomo reserve militias were called up to re-establish control over the Potol treaty zone. Tlingit ships in a corps of Za, but in the face of Pomo numbers, can it hold out? Huaricanga takes damage from the advancing Zavante force. If indeed Apoena takes the city, the Zavante could transform themselves from a moribund polity into a legitimate player in the center of the continent. The bulk of Corral forces are focused on retaking Caballete, where the Chono attack appears to have stalled. Having all but secured Jailolo, Cebu Timawa land on the island of Ternate itself. Could Cebu take the capital? If they do, they would once again be officially the frontrunner of the CBRX-5 in number of capitals. Please, 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 please. Okay, if I'm being honest, I did not know Susquehannock and Karankawa were still at war. Well, they aren't anymore, and Karankawa gives all 1 tiles of Copano to the victor. Let's try lore. In response to repeated Teotihuacan encroachments on the city-state's traditional rights, the elite of Copano sought a foreign security guarantor. The only obvious option was the rising Susquehannock Empire, whose influence in the Gulf of Mexico has steadily grown as metropolitan Karankawan territory has contracted. While not a perfect partnership, Copano is now capable of balancing the interests of the two powers on either side against one another, allowing for an amount of diplomatic leverage, so long as they don't push too hard. Jailolo flips one more time, but the main pressure has shifted to the capital. Get him, Cebu! Oop, I already somewhat talked about this earlier, so here's the lore section that was supposed to be in the second paragraph over there. The Ayatsin is the Susquehannock version of the Anishinaabe Ogichita, using larger muskets that produce greater firepower than the small, mass-producible ones of the Anishinaabe. Due to the heavier weaponry, however, Susquehannock musketeers travel very light and live off the land to a greater extent. Tlingit masses muskets and cuirassiers on the Pomo border. The city of Batiklekawi, located on the Rogue River, is captured, though it is likely to keep flipping. Flipfests favor the Civ with greater production, which is definitely Tlingit. Perhaps taking my advice, Ethiopia attacks Hyksos. Both forces are sparse at present, but if the war goes long, Ethiopia has a definite advantage. Conversely, the longer the war continues, the greater possibility that Ethiopia is drawn into a two-front war. After countless, hopeless mountain offenses, Kara Kitai gives up, once again, on Karwar. It's okay, buddy. Maybe when artillery comes around. Dagon is losing territory on all sides to citadels, even from Yunnan. Any bets on who gets eliminated next? Right next to the Tang capital, which is, by the way, very small, is Isaac Newton. You might know him as the Apple guy. But actually, Isaac Newton didn't even know what an iPhone was, let alone work on them. Less importantly, Tang has completed the Porcelain Tower, the only 10 of 10 wonder before the Future Era. The tower grants a free Great Scientist, and plus 50% science from research agreements. Personally, I don't know how the research agreements work in Civ 5, but I imagine the utility of this wonder in a battle royale setting stems from the fact that there is an extraordinary amount of diplomatic dyads that Tang can leverage for research agreements, making the mechanic generally more powerful than games with only 6 to 12 civilizations. The Guaycuru-Potiguara War continues, with Potiguaran forces pressing down on Katu, and Jakku being under threat by the surprisingly large Guaycuran navy. It's too bad that all of Potiguara's cities are in sheltered harbors, with only one tile of attack surface, meaning that Guaycuru will have difficulty in taking them with naval power alone. Potol is reclaimed by the numerically superior Pomo force, while Batikletkawi remains contested. Pomo has very few melee units, meaning that any flips will be difficult to flip back. Meanwhile, Teotihuacan crossbowmen enter into Pomo lands from the south, but have yet to approach any city. Like I predicted earlier, Zavante makes peace with Corral, successfully regaining Wadeze, along with a whole lot of land. Huge win for Zavante bros, if indeed you are out there. Corral seems to have regained its footing in Caballete, and the front line now seems static. Ignoring irrelevant war declarations against poor Phoenicia, here is a fantastic shot of the Tang-Roran border. Since Tang completed the Porcelain Tower, their science lead over Roran is likely only to increase over time. With all those knights, Roran is incentivized to strike now while the iron is hot, and not wait until Tang has an unassailable advantage. A very interesting aspect of this shot is that apparently Anishinaabe gave open borders to Tlingit. A détente between the two dominant powers may have been reached, and after the dismantling of the Pomo Empire, North America may in fact settle into a stable balance of power. France, having failed to achieve anything of note in their war against Scotland and Hansa, sit idle. Their science is poor, their neighbors are strong, and their prospects are weak. Have we already witnessed the apex of French power? The Mysore salient in northern India tightens as Pakistan citadels Mangalore. Despite Mysore's fantastic stats, it would take a miracle or a coalition war for them to exit their geographic prison. Their potential is directly inversely correlated to that of Bangladesh and Pakistan, both of which seem unlikely to spontaneously combust anytime soon. Karuane is now firmly under Zazao control, and Yan Lefidas keep pouring through Ore's borders to attack. Bisandugu's defenses have degraded severely since the last time we saw it, and only time will tell if it will be the next capital to fall. Seychelles pushes into Sumerian territory, where musketmen shred through the composite bowmen that stand in their way. To the south, Seychelles has elected to join the Phoenician hate train and declare war. If Maine did not exist, this war would be a lot more interesting. Sadly, they still live, and thus there exists only a one-tile-wide corridor through which Phoenicia can throw away its caravels. Free XP for Seychelles, I guess? Further progress is made by Tlingit against the cities of Kachibadon and Katkamkau. Pomo is holding on for now, but how long can they keep this up? Further north, Anishinaabe continues to attack Makamo, but no damage has yet been done. In a terribly twisted and sad turn of fate, Corral directs its frigates to attack Rapa Nui instead of defending Caballete. Anakena is already at half health, though no melee units are nearby. It's always easier to punch down, I suppose. Vidas Koger drops into the deep red, meaning that its capture is possible, but I have my doubts. The Phoenician land bireme continues to chill unabated. By visibility. Ternate's capital takes damage. With a trebuchet set up on Mindanao, Cebu has a chance to take the city if they can keep the pressure up. Go Cebu! Simultaneously, Foramadiahi, a brand new Ternate city, is taken into the deep red. Ethiopia pushes masses of armored cavalry into Hyksos territory. Given Hyksos' abysmal production, these losses are not easily replaced. This war could go slow, then all at once. Despite still being at war, New South Wales and Banuba have de-escalated their conflict. Active fighting only continues around Jijidu and Yuwa. This is lame. I think that Banuba getting the Great Wall is going to single-handedly ruin New South Wales' game in the long run. They need to expand towards a continent, but Great Wall combined with open terrain and the ability to stay technologically relevant means that New South Wales just needs to wait until dynamite, at which point the Great Wall movement reduction effect stops working, to kill Banuba. Sad. Anishinaabe continue to make some progress towards Makamo, but still haven't damaged the city. Tlingit is in a similar boat, but in every one of these shots, Pomo has fewer and fewer units. Another boring, useless shot of this boring, useless war. Potawara is crap. Vaikuru has decent poblometrics, but had too terrible of an early game. Bit of a Estonia Bjarmians vibe going on here. And for our final shot of this week, we have an IGE screen cap showing that Bangladesh has constructed Wat Phra Keo. It's a pretty good one, a 7 of 10 on the Wonder rankings. Wat Phra Keo gives +3 science, +1 great scientist point, +1 science from religious buildings in all cities, and +20% science in this city. Thank you all so much for listening, and thank you to the showrunners, power rankers, and community for being great and bringing joy and entertainment to our lives. This episode was a very eventful one, and a fun one to write, and I hope you all tune in next week. This is Quantum Botany, now a 4-time narrator, saying good night. And this is Doc Ito, your audio narrator, saying Nani Mapuateri, Nani Mapuateri, Nani Mapuateri.